A young black girl sells her artwork for her chemotherapy. Then a millionaire comes by and surprises everyone. The morning heat enveloped the city like a heavy cloak, stifling and almost oppressive. The sun, already high in the sky, cast burning shadows on the cobblestones. The streets were full of people in a hurry, rushing through the city, their faces glued to their phones or lost in thought, not really paying attention to the little things that escaped their attention. Merchants sold their wares from colorful stalls, cars honked loudly, but everything seemed to blend into a familiar, stifling melody, as if the city itself was breathing with difficulty under the intensity of the heat. On the corner of a busy shopping area, where store windows were adorned with luxurious shelves and trendy handbags, Malika stood behind her small easel. A fragile young girl, almost invisible among the crowd who paraded without ever really seeing her. However, his face, marked prematurely by the ordeal of life, bore traces of resilience, a radiance that many did not immediately grasp. At 15, she seemed much older. His black eyes, a little lost under his long eyelashes, had this piercing look, that of someone who, despite his youth, had already experienced battles that some would never have to fight. Malika was black, small, fragile in appearance, but her determination never seemed to waver. His hands, covered in paint, carefully adjusted the brushstrokes on the canvas, fierce concentration in each movement. Her body, tired from the treatments, seemed lighter as her hands danced on the canvas. Art had become his lifeline, his only means of escaping reality. The noise of the city around her dissipated as soon as she began to paint, as if the entire universe fell silent to make room for her creation. In this silent world, she was queen. Each brushstroke was a victory, each shade of color a cry of hope. Malika had started painting a year earlier, just a few months after being diagnosed with cancer. The news hit his family like a bolt from the blue. His parents were devastated. Their world was crumbling under the weight of the injustice this disease represented. But Malika, instead of letting herself be overcome by fear, chose to channel her pain into art. She had discovered that painting could be her escape, her outlet. Her paintings were filled with bright colors and energy, like a kind of resistance to the illness that was slowly eating away at her. Landscapes bathed in vibrant colors of life, portraits of strong souls, scenes where light always dominated the shadows. Art had become his remedy, his escape. There was no room for sadness in his paintings. Each painting told a story of survival, strength, and beauty. Each painting sale represented more than a simple exchange of money. It meant one step closer to healing. Each painting sold was used to finance her chemotherapy treatments, long, exhausting sessions, often accompanied by intense pain, but which could not extinguish Malika's light. The diagnosis was relentless, the disease insidious, but his spirit was indomitable. Far from the cold hospital corridors and long days spent in sterile rooms, Malika clung to her easel like a beacon. For her, art was not just a distraction. It was a way to prove to the world and to herself that she would not be overwhelmed. She wasn't just a patient, she was an artist, a creator. And each painting was a testimony to his refusal to submit. Passers-by rarely stopped. The city, absorbed in its own concerns, continued to turn without really noticing the girl on the street corner. Sometimes, a curious look would fall on his works, a moment of curiosity in a busy world, but very quickly, people turned away. Some were content with a small smile, a nod, but most continued on their way, indifferent to the story hidden behind these colorful canvases. Malika had learned to deal with this indifference. It was part of his daily life now. She had learned to smile, even when she felt her heart sinking with loneliness, to respond politely to the rapid questions of passers-by who never really took the time to understand. But sometimes, like that morning, the lonely hours spent watching the crowds pass by became heavier. Fatigue, although hidden beneath his determination, was becoming more and more heavy. There were days when people's indifference turned into a weight that was difficult to bear. But she never let herself get completely down, because she knew she wasn't alone. "Are you sure you still want to be here, Malika? Maybe you should go back and rest," a soft voice said, interrupting her thoughts. It was her mother, Amina, approaching with a shopping bag in her hand. Amina still wore that same reassuring smile, even though her eyes betrayed the deep worry she felt. His look, although worried, was filled with infinite tenderness. Since the onset of the illness, Amina had put aside her own suffering to take care of her daughter. Malika knew that every day her mother suffered in silence, hiding her own fears behind tender gestures and an encouraging smile. But Malika could not ignore the more marked lines on her face, the shadows under her eyes, vestiges of the nights spent watching over her. "I'm fine, Mom. I want to paint. I want to sell," Malika replied with a smile, although fatigue was starting to set in her muscles, especially after this long week of treatments. But she didn't want to let her pain show. Amina, who had seen his face change color in an instant, approached Malika. His arms gently enveloped her, as if to protect her from this moment when the emotion was too strong. His heart was pounding, between surprise and disbelief. She never imagined that this moment would come so suddenly. Everything they had been through, all the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the silent suffering of watching her daughter fight against a merciless illness. It seemed unreal. And yet, there, in front of them, a man, a stranger, offered his daughter much more than compassion. It offered a chance, a real opportunity. Thomas Lefebvre observed the scene with a benevolent gaze, knowing perfectly well the impact of his words. He had seen artists, budding talents, but rarely such intensity, such strength hidden behind fragility. He knew there was not just potential in Malika's paintings, but a cry, a struggle, an indomitable resilience. And it was this same energy that had caught his eye from the first moment he laid eyes on his works. "You don't need to say anything right away," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Take your time. The important thing is that you know that there is a world waiting to see what you have to offer." He turned slightly towards Amina. "I understand that this may seem sudden, but know that I really want to help you, Malika. Not just as an artist, but as a person. It is essential that you stay healthy, that you focus on your art, without having to worry about the costs of treatment." Malika stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the man in front of her, a glimmer of hope growing in her gaze. She had grown up knowing that opportunities were often distant, hard to reach, and not meant for her. But here, at this very moment, a door opened in front of her. A chance to go beyond simple survival to achieve a bigger dream. A dream where his art, and not his illness, would be at the center of his life. But the fear of the unexpected, the fear of making a mistake, all this began to mix with the ecstasy of the opportunity. Amina, who had been watching Malika the entire time, took a deep breath and turned to Thomas, her eyes filled with gratitude and suspicion. "You have no idea how much this means to her. To us." Her voice cracked for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "But it's a big decision, and we want to take the time to think it through. It's all happening too quickly." Thomas nodded, fully understanding Amina's caution. "I'll let you think about it. There's no pressure. The important thing is that you're comfortable with this decision." He paused, as if wanting to make sure each word had a particular weight. "I will leave you with my contact information. You can call me at any time, even to discuss medical treatments, if you wish." He leaned down slightly, ready to leave, but before turning on his heel, he turned back to Malika, his eyes resting on her with rare attention. "Malika, keep painting. Don't let illness define you. You have a gift. And no matter what you choose to do next, I know you will go far." As he walked away, a silence fell between Malika and her mother. The noise of the city seemed to have died away around them, giving way to a suspended moment. Malika looked at the card Thomas had left her, holding it in her hands like a precious relic. Then she slowly turned to her mother, her lips trembling slightly. "Mom, do you think we can really do this?" Amina took a moment before answering. She knew it wasn't just a question about exposure or medical treatments. It was a question about the future, about life, about this little chance which, perhaps, would change everything. "I don't know, Malika," she said finally, with tears in her eyes. "You don't have to say anything. I believe in you, Malika. And I believe the whole world should know you." Thomas Lefebvre's words resonated like a promise, a breath of fresh air in a room that seemed suffocated by the heaviness of the trials. He had this intense look, full of deep conviction, as if he saw much more than the fragile young woman in front of him. He saw his soul, his potential hidden under layers of uncertainties and fears. He knew he wasn't just giving her a chance, but giving her the opportunity to transform her pain into art, her illness into a creative force. He handed over a business card with a gentleness almost unexpected for a man of his status, but in his gestures there was a form of almost sacred respect. "I'll organize this. In the meantime, I'll make sure you get the best treatment. You have the mind of a true artist, and it's time everyone knows it." These words floated around Malika, like a sweet melody that lulled her doubts. Malika, lost in this moment of astonishment, did not know how to react. She, a sick young woman, who fought against illness every day, had never considered that a man like Thomas Lefebvre could see in her not only the artist she wanted to be, but the artist she already was, with all her fragility, her pain and her beauty. Her heart beat faster, and she felt a warmth invade her being, as if a fire lit inside her was just waiting for a spark to spread. That day, Malika didn't just sell paintings. It was not the simple transaction of a work for money. That day, she had received much more than a material reward. She had received an incredible chance to live her dream, a chance to emerge from the shadow of illness and loneliness, to cross the boundaries of her limited world between the walls of her hospital room and the long hours spent in the uncertainty of her treatment. She had discovered that there were moments in life when destiny seemed to fall on us like a beneficial rain, where everything we have gone through, all the suffering, the failures, become the foundations of renewal. She was no longer just a patient. She was an artist, a creator whose talent was just waiting to be expressed. Months passed, but each day seemed brighter than the last. Thanks to the exhibition curated by Thomas, Malika's works were seen by influential collectors, respected art critics, and even celebrities. The first sale was just the beginning. And soon, others followed, some she had never dared to imagine. She sometimes found herself looking at her paintings in her little gallery, wondering if she was still dreaming. But more than the income that came in, what struck her the most was the respect, the recognition, the admiring gaze of others. She was no longer an unknown, an artist among many others. She had her place, a legitimate space in the art world. Her works spoke for her, and they told a story bigger than herself. Sales were only part of the story. Most importantly, his chemotherapy treatments were funded. The pain, the exhaustion that assailed her after each treatment session was still there, but it seemed more bearable, almost as if each brushstroke on a canvas, each moment of creation, was a victory against this illness that wanted to consume her. She could continue painting. She could continue to live. It was a luxury she hadn't dared to dream of a few months earlier. But what marked Malika the most, what touched her heart deeply, was neither the money nor the fame, but Thomas's gesture, his faith in her, his selfless support. In a world where often those who fought in silence were invisible, he had seen her potential, he had seen what she could become. He was not only a patron, a businessman. He had been a beacon, a guide in the darkness. He had shown her that there were always people ready to believe in her, even when all seemed lost. He had given him back a place in the world. In each painting that she painted from now on, Malika left a little of her soul. Each brushstroke was like a tribute to life, to those who believed in it, to those who, through their actions, had brought a ray of light into his dark life. These were not simply works of art. They were testimonies, living memories of his journey, moments of his suffering transformed into beauty. She knew, deep down, that no matter the challenges, she would never stop painting. She painted for herself, for those who had supported her, for those who had not had the chance to be seen. But above all, she painted for those who, like her, had to struggle in the shadows before finding their light. And she knew this message would be heard.